Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our goal is to engage, inspire, and empower the global community of risk practitioners. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and today I'm super excited to welcome all of you to this very special session of Let's Talk Risk, especially for audience outside the United States, in Europe, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. My guest today is Atty Chakraborty. She is a quality system engineer at Analog Devices. She specializes in regulatory affairs, digital health, ISO 14971, and quality management systems. Attrayee is a rising star in the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. She's very active in the RAPS and ASQ chapters in the Boston area, and she has had a very remarkable, very successful career already so far. So I can't wait to hear all about this from Attrayee. With that, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Naveen. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this talk. And I'm very excited to talk more about all the, different things in terms of regulations and also like how things are going on in India and so on. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, Attrayee, we want to talk about just the dynamic and fast-changing environment from a medical device point of view in India. I know the industry is evolving fast, and you have a first-hand experience. So, first, share with us your career journey.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen. Before I start, I would like to say that just giving a disclaimer that anything that I say is just my opinion, does not reflect anything that related to any organization or association I'm part of. But yes, going back to your question, I actually started in R&D. So I was kind of doing my PhD in the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, IISc Bangalore. I was in the biotechnology department there. And while doing that, I kind of felt that, how can I translate the things that I'm doing in the lab into a wider context of like manufacturing and scaling up. Incidentally, there was this incubator next to where I worked, which was in the ISC ecosystem itself, called CPD Med TBI. I just kind of like dropped there one day. I just wanted to see what's going on there because they had like all these EMC labs and things like that. So I was very curious. After going there, I spoke to the director there who was very friendly, and I kind of volunteer my time outside of the lab and kind of like understand how the ecosystem works in terms of startups or early idea formation when it comes to medical devices in India. I ended up helping a few of the early stage startups there with some of their ideas and their market strategy, or even in terms of compliance, what they need to follow and which countries to target when it comes to commercialization. So it was pretty exciting. I worked there for around a year. And then after that, I felt I needed more knowledge and experience on regulations and how other countries are also doing it. So that's when I decided to come to the US, and I got my master's degree, and currently I'm working. During that time, I worked with different types of companies as well, mostly in wearable space and also in VR technology and also in ophthalmology. So it's a mixture of digital health and implantables. But through this experience, I've gotten to know a lot more about how other countries are also doing their medical devices. So it's great to see the contrast and how India is also becoming a leader in that space.
Yeah, and this is exciting and moving quite fast, isn't it? In the last few years, from what I've heard, the medical device industry and the regulatory environment has actually evolved quite rapidly. So can you give us a little sense of what is happening on the ground out there?
Yep. So I've actually seen a lot of medical device companies having their booths in the US as well. In the conferences which happen here, I've seen many Indian-based medical device companies come here and provide services as well. Most of the things which I've seen before have been regarding testing. So like anything to do with like compliance testing to show compliance to certain standards, that had already been part of some of the things that Indian companies were doing. But lately, I've been seeing new ideas also emerge from the Indian ecosystem and startups like Cure AI, for example. Like I've seen companies who are like getting their 510Ks in the US and then they are ready to commercialize here as well as in India. I think it's a very strategic way to move forward because the medical device regulations in India, they are pretty new. Before, medical device and pharma was clubbed into one whole bucket, but now from 2017 onwards, it has been split and we have a new medical device regulation for that. So it's a from the CDSCO standpoint, which is the regulator in India, they would definitely be very happy to see if you already have a US clearance and then just do clinical trials in India to just be able to market it. So I think I've seen many startups in the Indian system go through this route where they first initially go through a 510K or some other country clearance, and then they also market it back home in India as well. So so most of the criteria are similar. You probably just need to do clinical trials again in India because that's your local population where you want to sell your product, but it gives a good milestone for companies as well. I've seen, especially at CPD Med where I used to work, for clearances which have happened there, it gives a lot of investor confidence as well. So it's not simply just something related to compliance, it's also a business strategy in that regard.
I got you. Yeah. So now we know that a lot of multinationals or big international medical device companies have presence in India, like the GE Medicals or Siemens or even J&J. Tell us a little bit more about how the domestic innovation is evolving. And you have great experience in terms of the premier scientific institution in India. But where else is innovation happening, and how is it that the domestic environment is changing rapidly in light of these industry support in terms of regulation and also government policy? Yeah. So in India, for the last, I would say at least the last 2 to 3 years, there's a lot of funding MedTech parks, which are happening, I think, in Hyderabad and Vizag, along those areas as well, along with Bangalore. And there are a lot of medical device conferences also happening in India at this point. Many of the regulators and the industry experts and also representatives from the companies you mentioned, they usually come there, and there's a lot of discussion around policy and also around how to encourage this startup ecosystem. There's this really nice policy kind of a government support thing, which is MedTech Mitra, which is again it's a government initiative which encourages medical devices and provides even support, like expert support in terms of regulatory or quality or even business strategy SMEs to these budding startups so that they have that ecosystem. So it's similar to the US model where you have an idea, you have this board of advisors, and they kind of give you an opinion on how you should go forward in terms of timelines. So they're trying to build a very similar ecosystem there as well to give support. And I think apart from the traditional bigger companies like you mentioned, and apart from that, the academic labs, the most important selling point for most medical companies at this point is cost and simplicity. Most of the startups which I have engaged with in the past, they are focusing around those two concepts, because if the market is in India, then it's those factors of cost, accessibility, and ease of use. Those are the major selling points compared to in other countries where probably if you have one additional technological feature might make your product stand out more. But in India, it's the ingeniousness and the simplicity which really sells. So. Yes, that's great. So it seems to me that we don't want to overcomplicate, over-design a product so that it becomes too expensive, not affordable, not accessible. We want to keep it simple. We want to solve the problem. It seems to me, Attrayee, that the ingredients for rapidly accelerating this industrial environment is there. We have technology, we have a lot of people, we have great doctors, we have hospitals, we have access to patient population, different demographics, and even the government policy is changing in terms of all the support that they are providing. So it seems to me that it's a very, very promising environment for young professionals to consider for their career. Can you tell us a little bit more about, if you are a young professional, let's say engineering student in India or even in medicine or other disciplines, how should you be thinking about your career journey or career trajectory in the medical industry?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say because as I said, many of the Indian agencies are also actively contributing to this. So for example, if you are in the hospital ecosystem, the ICMR ecosystem actually helps you to have similar incubators, or if you're in a research lab in a university, not just the the top tier well-known universities, but also I have seen local universities as well have this concept of incubators. So I think that's like one really nice way to kind of vet your idea before going all commercial. There are like venture capital and like also other forums where if you want to advance your idea, that's where people usually go. As I said, these incubators or accelerators, they give you that initial funding and at least to do the prototype or the minimum viable product, as we call it, to just understand if it's a viable product or not. So I think that's one way. If you are a founder, that's one way to go. If you want to work in this space, then I would say if you're already in the hospital ecosystem somehow, then it's a great place to have a collaboration with people who are also engineers and then be part of the product development itself. So that's another way. For people who want to like work in like, let's say GE Healthcare or Philips or all the other companies which are out there who have a presence in India, I would say like, again, finding a job in that respect is slightly non-traditional because the courses currently that we have in India, they are very geared towards academic sciences. And there are certain platforms where you can learn more of regulatory. I know there are a lot of like vendors out there who actually provide these kind of courses, these mini courses, which you can do if you want to pivot. I would say they are okay. It's something you can do if you want, but there are a number of free resources which you can also use. RAPS, for example, is like global society for regulatory professionals and quality professionals, and they also have an India base. So I was just going through this last night. They have an India local networking group as well, and there are around 100 members in that group. And so most of them are already in the industry, or some of them are trying to understand how to enter it. So again, I would say the same thing that goes across the world: network. Yeah, exactly. So if you are new to the space and you want to pivot or know more about how the ecosystem works, I would highly suggest joining these kind of networking groups where you can talk to people and get to know more about them. As I said, lately, India has also been hosting medical device conferences. So in Delhi or in Hyderabad. So again, if you want to attend those would be great as well. The CDSCO, even though it might seem it's really hard to reach because it's just this name that you see across every place, but I've spoken to some officials in the CDSCO and they're very friendly, especially to early career people, and they also want people with expertise to come and contribute to the policy making part of Indian regulations because it's very new. So I see a lot of scope in terms of growth, not just from the manufacturing side, but also from the policy shaping aspect.
Very nice. So I think you gave us quite a lot of very nice suggestions, and I want to make sure that we don't lose them. So I want to capture a few of them here. You started by saying that if you want to launch something on your own, let's say you're a founder, you have a great idea, get involved in these incubators. Talk to people who are doing this type of innovative work. Begin to develop your network and test your idea. See how far it's going to go. And then you might get a lot of support from funding side, investing side, and from even technology side. And if you are looking to build a career as a professional in this industry, you mentioned networking is very important. Make sure that you have an opportunity to talk to as many people as you can, participate in these conferences. And I would say it would make sense to, raise your hand and say, I'm actually going to give a presentation and I want to give a talk in this conference and share my knowledge, my perspective. And I want to make sure that, guys, all of you understand that this is why we do these discussions on Let's Talk Risk, is to bring everybody together, to build a community. So this is also a great networking opportunity. And finally, don't forget RAPS, which is a global organization of regulatory affairs professionals. And it's not, Attrayee, I don't think I'm wrong by saying that it's not just for regulatory people. RAPS is very broad, and it has a broad spectrum of people with different professions or focus, but some interest in regulatory affairs. Is that correct?
Yep, agreed. I would also like to add this community called ABLE, ABLE. If you search for that, they are actually this India forum which helps these early stage pre-seed startups grow. And I have, as part of the incubator ecosystem, I've engaged with ABLE before, so they're pretty flexible, and it's a great resource if you want to
Okay,
tackle.
we will share that link in the show notes. So, Attrayee, we have a question from Vikas. He's asking, what is your opinion about the medical regulation in India versus EU MDR or other global regulations? Could you speak to that briefly?
Yep, sure. Again, this is, I would say, a pretty common question at this point. Like, what is the difference? As I said, like, the Indian regulation is pretty new. It's in 2017. So many of the risk aspects or even the clinical trial aspects, those are very similar to the US regulations that you have currently at this point. The device classifications, I would say that the device classification is something which is a static list at this point. So if you look at the Indian government website, the CDSCO website, you'll see like this list of devices under each class and each category type. The same way we have a product code in the US, it's very similar, but you have a static list there. So that's one major difference. And the clinical trial aspect I already talked about. It's always good to have compliance with ISO 13485. So the basic tenets of 13485 are also there in the Indian regulations as well. That's why most companies, they are like, okay, if I already have a 510K clearance, it's just easier in that sense. Prove it to the Indian regulators as well.
It seems to me that India, even though it's recently new from a medical device regulation point of view, in their efforts, they are going to work towards the approach that the Global Harmonization Task Force has taken, right? Globally, my understanding is that they want to be a global player, not just like advance their industry domestically. They want to be a global player. So it makes sense to me. Now, specific to EU MDR, I don't know to what extent we don't want to talk about too much detail, but what is your overall impression, Attrayee, in terms of the medical device regulation in India when it compares to EU MDR?
Yep. Again, I would say it's very similar in terms of the philosophy. So like the device classification in terms of risk, all of that is similar. When it comes to the QMS, again, I would say if you read the Indian regulation, you can find elements from the FDA standpoint and also the EU MDR standpoint. It's kind of in one place. And India has also, I think, become an affiliate, if I'm not wrong, in the IMDRF or an observer, one of the two. So it is clear that they want to go towards the harmonization aspect as well.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not to say that the regulation is as prescriptive or as broad as EU MDR. EU MDR seems to be like just a monster from my perspective. It's just like quite a lot there. And there's a way business gets done in the EU. It's not to say that that's the same way India is going. And it's also not the same way that FDA is going. But your point is, it's aligned. The overall regulatory philosophy and approach is aligned. Risk classification, a risk-based approach, a QMS, all those requirements are aligned. And it'll be very important for us to review that regulation and really understand it. And I think that is why these conversations in a community and a networking event can be very useful for professionals to participate. And that way they can enhance their learning, right?
And also, like, India has even spoken on the topic of AI-enabled medical devices and how they're seeking to regulate it. So the IMDRF actually came up with a really like a guideline of ethical use and all of that. And they did even point to certain metrics in that aspect. So it seems that they are thinking not just about general software, but also in the context of AI.
I was going to ask you about that because logically it makes sense to me that India will try to innovate rapidly in the AI space because it is known in the world as the hub of technology development. A lot of brilliant engineers out there. As I already mentioned, doctors who can test and try these AI-based devices. So logically, it seems to me that strategically they will try to advance AI-enabled medical device innovation quite rapidly in India. So on one hand, it's very good for me to hear that they are paying attention and they are speaking to it and developing policy. But can you share anything top of mind that comes to you in the India context where AI is beginning to play a little bit more prominent role in the medical sector?
Yeah. So I've come across like certain companies or ideas where it's mostly around how do we digitize the amount of information that we have. One basic difference from the US versus India is that in terms of medical records, for example, most of the records are electronic in the US, but in India, like if I also recall correctly, even my medical records, they're all like written up on paper. So when it comes to like decision making, a lot of the information is lost through it. So I've seen those kind of ideas come up where how do we digitize that information? How do we have this one-stop shop of information diagnostic centers and also other facilities under one roof? So that is more along the convenience aspect for an end user. How do we disrupt in terms of like standalone medical devices? Like there are like a number of them who even have FDA clearances, I was saying. I don't want to take too many names, but like there are those which are specific to even AI or digital pathology, cardiology, and all of that, mental health apps as well. So I can provide a list of that later as well.
Yeah, we can share that information. But it seems to me that the low-hanging fruit here really is first digitization of all this paper-based system that we have in the healthcare system. And then moving on to more innovation. And it's happening in the US as well, right? Where we are trying to improve the clinical workflow, make it more productive, more efficient, consolidate all the information. One idea that came to my mind right now, I've heard so much about this. So much digitization has already taken place in India with this Aadhaar card, and everyone is already involved in that. And it's not inconceivable that we could have this integrative view at an individual level of their healthcare using that connecting point. Does that sound kind of reasonable to you, that it might happen?
Yep, it is possible. I think that's where the trend is going. But then when it comes to like the cybersecurity risks and all of that, that's like a major point where like I think that professionals can actually contribute to, because it's still a gap and it's something which is less explored, at least in my experience, in the Indian ecosystem. So that is actually a really good point that you brought up, because when it comes to the cybersecurity aspect, we still, at least in my experience, do not have that many SMEs who are either engaged or involved in the medical device space. So that's something which I feel is a great potential to contribute.
It's an area of opportunity.
Yep.
It's an area of opportunity. So before we close, Attrayee, let's talk about one more thing. Let's say you are a student right now, maybe doing your undergrad in engineering or maybe pharmacy or chemistry or some scientific discipline. How should you be thinking about your next steps, and what 2 or 3 things you would advise them to do as they consider maybe a future in the medical sector?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Naveen. So I can speak about like what worked for me. And that is like most of the institutions that we have currently, the Indian education ecosystem, it is, I think, the best place to start, because in terms of gaining credibility, I think if we first, as a student, if you're already working, let's say in a research lab or, some way associated with research, you can actually like directly talk to your professors and say that, hey, I think this seems to work, or like this has a potential for, for becoming a product. How do I take the next steps? I actually started with that, and my professor led me to that incubator. This is probably a good place where you can contribute. So that's like one very basic step, which I think a student can take. And even if the incubators are not in that university, there are a lot in each city as well. Like, as I was saying, most of the cities, Hyderabad or Bangalore or Delhi, Chennai, many of them have that. So that's one place to definitely start. And you can even write grants for your product to be funded. So those things, I think, are on a later stage when you have the whole idea and everything. But if you want to like just start off, I think being in close contact with the incubators is very essential, because you have the EMC labs there, you have a number of labs there, testing facilities, and you get exposed to those technologies. You get exposed to why we are doing something and like what are the gaps that we are facing when doing it. And that's where the critical thinking concept really hits you, because you see these gaps and the ideas flow from there itself, because you see that, okay, these are the gaps, what we can do this to mitigate these gaps. And that's how in my life, at least, it has evolved from just working in the lab and, doing stuff on the bench to coming up with solutions and potential ways to commercialize.
But the most important point here is to remember is to take the initiative. Don't be passive. Don't wait for someone to come to you and tell you what to do. You gave us an example from your career. You took the initiative to go talk to your professors, and you went out to the incubators, and you went out to get that exposure. So the opportunities are there, guys. That's what I want all of us to understand, is that there are tremendous opportunities. But it is only when we take the initiative and raise our hand to do something about it that we can take advantage of it. So with that, Attrayee, I want to thank you so much. And we have unfortunately run out of time. I want to give you just a couple of minutes to process your thoughts and share some key takeaway points with us. And in the meantime, I want to share just a couple of announcements with you guys. Those of you who are attending live, know that this is going to be a monthly event, especially at this hour, which is more convenient to the audience in India and that part of the world. This is a monthly event, but we also do a weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation on LinkedIn at 11 Eastern every Friday. That's a weekly event, and you are all welcome to join those conversations as well. But this one is specially designed with the audience in India and South Asia region in mind. The second announcement is, guys, I'm going to be offering a post-market safety surveillance workshop very soon. It's coming up maybe in a couple of weeks from now. It's a 4-hour hands-on workshop where we learn about post-market safety surveillance requirements according to ISO 14971 and 13485, and share some practical examples, hands-on experience. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me and I'll provide more details to you. With that, Attrayee, the floor is yours. If you can share a few key takeaway points with us.
Yep. Thanks for that, Naveen. So I would say that in terms of like early career professionals who want to go into the regulatory or the quality space, one biggest takeaway is, of course, you need to take initiative. The space in India is specifically to regulatory and quality is smaller because it's very niche and it's very difficult to reach. But as I was saying, the RAPS India networking group, there are conferences. That's where you build your network. The medical device industry in India is very like small and well connected. So if you start meeting one person, there's a high chance they will introduce you to more people. And that's how you build your credibility and you get more into that space. And my second takeaway would be like, regardless of where you are, if you're in the industry or if you're in research, talking to like new founders on their ideas give you a perspective on how to give a solution to a particular problem, which is very different from the general educational ecosystem currently. So I think that also helps to trigger the critical thinking aspect. And it's something that regardless of where you are, if you talk to founders, it'll definitely enlighten you on how can we contribute more to the medical device space.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Attrayee, for taking this time and sharing your insights with us. I'm excited. I'm personally excited about the dynamic environment in India, and I hope our audience today are also feeling excited about that. But guys, know that it's a community and be a part of it. Reach out to all of us. We are here to help. Yeah. And I wish you all the best. Thanks again, and we will see you once again next month. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. It was very, very nice to talk to you, Naveen. Thank you.